Thanks for being here today, and welcome. Well, I'm recording. Like I said, I record when I can. Putting my mini fridge next to my recording setup, good or bad idea? Bad. Sorry, I'm just warming up. So much to share, and I shouldn't even be sharing what I'm gonna share right now. I just recently did some boots on the ground in Colorado, looking at some more coke kilns, but this is meant to just be a little segment. Who knows how long it'll go. I thought we should just look at an electric battery and understand it a little better. I live off of batteries. My solar system has 4 100 amp hour batteries, and these power my house. This computer I'm on, the damn mini fridge next to me. An electric battery is a source of electric power, consisting of one or more electrochemical cells with external connections for powering electrical devices. I don't know, this picture's kind of a giveaway. Where am I going with this? And I'm not an electrical engineer, and not even well versed. I did build my solar system, and I've always tinkered with wires, but I'm no expert. I believe in free energy and gathering charge from the ether, and have seen all the experiments, many on YouTube, where people send a wire up, either by drone or tower, and gather a charge of electricity. This is a fact. For me, building a tower and getting a wire up there would be more expensive than having my solar system. I have 4 panels, and I could use more. I think one could use 10 panels, 200 watts each, 70% of them on the south side, and the rest on the east and west. When a battery is supplying power, its positive terminal is the cathode. And we see that on the top of the battery. We have hypothesized that we see this on top of buildings. The cathode, or the cathedral. And I don't want to get too technical. Its negative terminal is the anode. The terminal marked negative is the source of electrons that will flow through an external circuit to the positive terminal. When a battery is connected to an external electric load, a reaction converts high energy reactants to lower energy products, and the free energy difference is delivered to the external circuit as electrical energy. Historically, the term battery specifically referred to a device composed of multiple cells. However, the usage has evolved to include devices composed of a single cell. So very interesting. Historically, the term referred to a device composed of multiple cells. And that's what we do. We link these cells together, making a massive battery. And now when we look up battery forts, we see that historically they called these military forts batteries. All these Civil War ruins coined batteries. And just way over the top, we're told they would have placed cannons in each one of these cells. And did these cells have another purpose? Is simply my question right now. Is a cell really a cell? Or was the placement of cannons in each of these cells simply a repurposement? And most of these old world batteries or forts or star forts were repurposed into anything. Oftentimes prisons or prison cells. And honestly, that makes even more sense than the cannon story. Is it by accident or by design that they would name these batteries? Did the inheritors know their true purpose and have no shame when they named them long before the advent of power? And it wouldn't be until now, barely, that we might begin to understand what these buildings actually were. Are we dealing with power cells? Are we dealing with cathodes? When we see what we in this community call antiquitech, antique technology. When I went out to the coke kilns in Sunnyside, Utah, I was dumbfounded. Eventually it became clear that this was the top of a larger structure, and that all these domes, interconnected, were actually most likely acting as a battery. Such a thing is the only thing that makes sense. And even when we look at these old fortifications, some of the oldest ruins in North America, we see they're called batteries. Battery Russell at Fort Stevens in Oregon, section after section after section, vitrified, explaining the heat. Batteries produce heat. Batteries must discharge and sometimes explode or have meltdowns. Here we see Battery Potter in Canada, and really lending to the idea that the buildings were functional. And these are the batteries. The buildings are gone. In some cases, we see parts of the buildings remaining, such as this battery at Fort Wadsworth. But in some cases, all that remains is the slightest footprint, the foundation, and whatever's underneath it. As we can see here at the Battery Pensacola. And the narrative would tell us they put the cannon here. Here's another example. The building is gone, but the battery remains. Here we can see an old image of a battery buried. In past videos I've called these plug holes many different things, but today we're calling them batteries, as they call them. And the plug holes now seem like we would have had the cathode connected to these points. Again, the top of a battery. And this one is very interesting. We see kind of a Greco-Roman looking building. And this is Battery Hoskins. Battery Hoskins, 1921 to 46 in Galveston County, Texas. And it looks like they've built a hotel over this fort. Here we go. Very similar to what we saw with the ruins at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in California. Clearly ruins underneath, and they covered it with a golf course and a hotel. Very convenient. But I digress. So all these plug holes, they have plugged something up. They've plugged up the cathodes. All this old tech has been covered up, now just seeming pointless. Now people visit these sites and think cannons and balls. What a stupid place to put a cannon. I really should be making a video on this exploration that I recently went on. This is in Colorado. Again, lime kilns. And seeing the same signs of heat damage as you can see here. And I simply propose that the kiln and the military battery may have actually been batteries or power plants. This one could not have been any more in the middle of nowhere. Here I'm south of the town of Carbondale, and even further south than Carbondale, just in the middle of nowhere. There's even a sign that warns you that there's no services for 60 miles. And out here, we have these historic coke ovens out here. And really, what do you need when you're out in the middle of nowhere? You need power. And that's something that all of these military fortifications and lime kilns and coke ovens have in common. They're in the middle of nowhere. Inaccessible 6 months out of the year before the invention of the automobile. And what makes the most sense is these are the remains of old world batteries, which would have worked in conjunction with a power source. And in my opinion, these would have been demolished if they didn't serve useful. And I think they did do some coal coking in these ovens. They didn't know what else to do with them, these old batteries. And we can actually see that here. And later in time, they came and rebuilt them to suit their purpose. Concrete, newer block type of cinder and iron to affix doors to. Eventually they abandon these practices, and if we're lucky, a historic society comes in and sees value and protects whatever remains. And again, this video will be shared in more depth, but I kind of just wanted to give you a little taste of what I saw and what's been on my mind lately. And I want to finish off with some castles in the Napa Valley. We've discussed the insane asylum. I think it's called Kirkbride. The insane asylum castle in the Napa Valley, the beautiful winemaking Napa Valley in California. And they had this insane asylum castle way before they had the population to require such things. And it turns out the Napa Valley is full of ruins, full of castles and old walls. Old walls that remind me of the Cyclopean walls in Greece and just everywhere. The Cyclopean walls are found everywhere, but they are more famous in Greece. And one might attribute it to a cyclops. When we see what looks like a rough construction, I think that's what they want to portray, a primitive, rough, barbaric cyclops construction, but actually I believe this was very fine at one point. And all the mortar and lime has vanished, either through heat or water or both, and what we're left with is something that looks semi-primitive, but is anything but. And this is Greece, and today I want to take you to the Napa Valley. The Napa Valley of California, and in particular Soda Canyon. So we're going to look at this channel here called IamKairos. A really great channel, does boots on the ground. And I've watched many of his videos and have been wanting to share all of them. And today I watched this one this morning, a 12-minute video, and I thought today's the day. He starts off at this gate, this old abandoned gate with this crappy wooden blockade. We see what looks like a cathode on top, and I think this is the most complete version, at least of this lower block work that we're going to see. And as you'll see soon, it has a brick core. God, my resolution is really crappy. And here a look at this mountain, or is it a mountain? We see a castle at the base here, in absolute ruins, almost looking cyclopean, and this is just some random castle. Looks like we have access, perhaps, here above. And here are the ramparts. My resolution is really poor. And boom. So here he's zooming into a wall, just out there, out at the base of this mountain, these old cyclopean ruins. And this video is a fascinating 12-minute video. He calls it the Soda Canyon Ruins Part 1. And what he's discovered is this wall runs all along California. It seems the old world was full of old great walls. And here again, the castle, faring better than other parts of the wall. I think because they were just sticking up higher. And here we go, in all different states of condition. Some looking completely eroded and melted. Some parts looking like concrete, some brick, and we'll get into that. Now he goes to another little area, and we see again what looks like the same type of pillar that we started with at the beginning here, but now it's in worse condition there. Still parts preserved, but now we see what looks like a crude stonework. And is it a crude stonework, or is it brick? Again, this is the same site, just a different part. We see something like this, more encased, looking more original, a facade covering a brick, and then this. What? And this channel's really great. He's one of the few that actually takes a hammer and chisel to a lot of rocks, revealing what's actually within. But in this case, he didn't have to. It's apparent as it is. And here we can see sections of brick still complete. But the most remarkable thing is that this ball is still remaining on top. This ball, this cathode, this red ball of cathode. And what is this ball made of? Remember, it was missing on the other one. It was completely missing on the other one, but the other one was more preserved, in better condition. And maybe it's because it was missing its cathode. This one has been fried. And let's have a little look. Both sides. And this is a little more out of the way. And look how they've just put wood and, again, a stupid little fence. Even this pillar in ruins is exquisite. The quality and the craftsmanship. Even in ruins, it's holding up beautifully. Even missing facading and mortar. And again, many people question whether brick can heat to such a high temperature that it might resemble stone. And I think this is a good case here. And not so much this part. Not unless you've studied enough examples. But really the top. When we go up to the top cathode part is where it really gets fascinating here. Now watch, he zooms in, and what we see is a mass of melted brick. And very advanced, the old world, the way they could make brick in the shape of a ball or even a brick sculpture completely protruding out of the building. Beautiful designs. And here I'm not sure. I imagine this was just a brick ball, perhaps with some metal running through, serving as a conductive cathode. And to me, this is absolutely fascinating, the way it's melted and yet we can clearly still see the brick. And I've been studying a lot of melted brick lately. I felt it was an important part of the puzzle and have taken a lot of heat for it. But I'm so very glad that I did. Even just yesterday, I was in Colorado looking at these coke kilns which had the dripping brick, and it wasn't dripping from above and it wasn't the mortar in between, it was the absolute brick dripping. And perhaps I'll show that right now. And here we go. Here we're in the inside of the oven and we see the dripping. We see the dripping up here, and in fact all of the brick has fused together, has simply fused together. Any more and this brick becomes one, drips and fuses and becomes unrecognizable as brick. This is pushing it. Here again, and we can see Chief. And let's really get a good look. And just like we saw in Utah, no soot damage, but excellent evidence of melted and fused brick. Now, what if this brick was out in nature, just on the ground? Now it fuses and they call it sandstone. And I'm not trying to beat a dead horse, this is just perfect evidence. And I still haven't shared this trip with you, but perhaps we'll just do it in stages like this. So back to this melted brick evidence. In Soda Canyon, Napa Valley, California, we see that this too has fused into a round blob of brick, and an excellent showcase he has provided and really pairing nicely with my recent boots on the ground. So there we go, the cathode, and here we still see a little cathode poking up at the top. The people who were cleaning up history really didn't know. They were sloppy because they didn't understand, especially in recent times. And as we've come to find out, there's evidence everywhere. So I think I've gone on enough. Do check out his channel. He's really encouraged me to head back out to the Napa Valley. Looks like there are ruins everywhere. Like I said, this wall runs for, I believe, hundreds of miles. Who is exploring the Great Wall of California? Well, this channel is, and so am I. We've been discussing the work of Jason at Archaics and his proposition that resets could occur every 138 years. This is not shocking in our community. This would be very shocking to others outside of the community. But 138 years. And unfortunately, when we look at history, we see this evidence, but the narrative is completely conflicted. Now Jason says one of the last resets, at least in North America, would have been 1902. And of course, as always, I don't know. The way I learn is through everyone and everything. Now here was a fascinating comment that ties into this, and the idea of maybe how there are some nuggets of truth slipped in to all the lies. Now Mark Twain would have been responsible for writing a false history through his works, the way that Hollywood is responsible for not only writing a false history today, but a false present, and all the space BS and everything that they want us to think is first falsified on a stage. And here was a great comment, and let me get right into it. Wander Awake says, this is a fascinating theory. I think it has a lot of merit. She's new to the rabbit hole and grateful for all that do this research. Might the star forts be nodes that sustain an energy grid? Do they contain sacred geometry? And yes, they do. She's absolutely right. And it's one thing to talk about these things being batteries and machines, simply parts of greater infrastructure. But also, she reminds me that yes, everything is connected in this grid, realm-wide, and nothing is individual, playing roles within roles, serving many different functions. And she says perhaps they tap into energy on the earth like the chakras of the human body, or acupuncture points, I would add, in the Chinese medicinal chart. A chart that is missing in Western medicine, and is probably the reason, by design, that so many people are sick. But I digress. She says also this is not about this particular video, but something I wanted to say about this research in general. I have studied literature, propaganda as it turns out, all my life. And when I started looking at this information, I went back and started reading Mark Twain with new eyes. I think most of his books were to establish a narrative, but I also think there's a lot of truth in them. I'm reading Roughing It, which is his supposedly true account of traveling west in the 1850s and experiencing the gold rush, etc. A couple of things struck me. One, he talks about establishing the legislature in the Nevada territory. Some landowner in 1850 had a large stone building that was apparently standing empty. Twain says he put carpeting and spittoons in this building and donated it to the legislature. She says, I looked online and believe this building is still standing in Carson City. It has turrets, but the guy apparently already had it on his property. So here a little nugget by Mark Twain, just inheriting this turret-adorned stone building and donating it to the legislature. Also, Twain describes crossing the desert and says there is ash, not sand, everywhere, and the ash sticks to the skin and gets on everything. Then there is a description of veins of cement in the earth that contain chunks of gold, and an excellent comment, and I thank you for this, seeming like a big melt. Ash, whole cities turn to blobs, and gold, even as I heard in Native American tales, gold was said after the last cataclysm to just squeeze out of the mud at the base of the mountains. And what is a mountain? And what is gold? And what is my point? For today, I thank you for being here. I love you all. God bless, and I'll see you next week.